Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show.
Hi, everyone. This is Gayle Carson, and I have a delightful guest today, Diane Huth. Diane loves helping people succeed and finds innovative and out-of-the-box ways to help them meet their goals. She is a 30-plus year veteran marketing superstar and has held top-level marketing roles at a wide range of household name companies, including Johnson & Johnson, Frito-Lay, Carnation, Nestle, CBS Cable, and Mission Foods. These corporate roles switched to entrepreneurial positions with startup companies, where she's helped launch and run small firms struggling to make payroll while launching innovative products and services. In her day job, she is the Chief Marketing Officer of BioVideo, an entrepreneurial company which is pioneering maternity videography. And her night job is teaching marketing and branding at two, not one, but two leading universities in San Antonio, Texas. She was stunned to learn how unprepared college students were for the upcoming job search. Based upon her own vast experience interviewing, hiring, coaching, and mentoring hundreds of employees, she wrote the Amazon best-selling career guide, Brand You, to Land Your Dream Job, to teach her students and job seekers of all ages strategies and tactics to find and land their dream job. She's also publishing a series of single-topic job search guides. Whew, Diane, that's a lot. And I didn't even finish everything else that you're doing. So welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you so much, Dr. Gayle. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, you are called the accidental career coach. Why is that? What happened that it's an accident that you're coaching people in their careers?
Well, life is an accident. You never know where it's going to take you, right? You just go along for this wonderful journey. Like you said, I've spent most of my career, 40 years, working with corporate marketing in corporate America. And then about 3 years ago, I started teaching marketing at two universities. And it was when I discovered that these kids, bright, talented kids, they just spent $100,000 in tuition. 4 years, didn't have a clue. So I went home after I discovered this, and I wrote a presentation, which I gave in class the next week. And then people wanted, the deck of slides, and then they wanted a seminar, and then they wanted a webinar, and it grew up to become a book. And so the book is positioned about what I know most, which is branding and marketing. And the premise is that you are a brand. You don't think of yourself like a brand, but we need to be thinking of ourselves like a brand. And therefore, we need to be positioned using the marketing tools and techniques that I use to market any other product and using those to market yourself. So it was just kind of ended up here by accident.
Well, it's funny because I agree with you totally. I think you're always a brand of yourself. I always say to people, it's you incorporated, and you have to take care of you incorporated. And it's amazing that you're saying that college students are still in the situation where they don't seem to get that. And maybe they're not still getting some of the courses that they need to get. But it is an amazing thing when you take care of yourself and the opportunities that present itself. And also, networking with the right people so that you're in the places where opportunities are. That makes a big difference as well. But you wrote this book. And, it's quite a book. It's not a little tiny thing. So what prompted you to write it?
Well, the first book was written really because my students didn't know. And I was stunned because, at this end of my career, I assumed that everybody knows this stuff. We've been writing resumes forever. One of the things that's happened is the world has changed on us while we weren't looking. We weren't aware. And all of a sudden, the job search market has changed dramatically in my generation doesn't know that. We still think it's local and personal. And with the advent of applicant tracking systems and online job search boards, the job market has transformed dramatically in the last 10 years. And even people who are mid-career and not older, but even mid-career younger professionals, they need to know that things are different today, and you have to change your career search and your career marketing plan to adapt to this new technology that's changing everything. And because of that, while I was marketing my book and I was really talking to colleges and younger professionals, all of a sudden I started getting these emails and phone calls from, people I'd known and worked with, as team members and collaborators and vendors for years, people in their 50s and their 60s that I knew and trusted and valued. And all of a sudden these friends were saying, can you help me? I've been out of work for 2 years. I lost my house. I'm living in my car. I eat out of food banks. That's the only way I can feed my family. And I'm going, but how could that be? I know you. You're good. You're top of the, you've got the education, you've got the experience. You are top of your game. And that's when I discovered the crisis of age discrimination. I did not realize it until 2 years ago. And I was in an Uber in Philadelphia going to the airport. And I always ask my Uber or Lyft driver, what do you do when you're not driving, And this lady looked at me and her knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Tears rolled down her face. She had to pull over and stop the car. And she says, I have 2 master's degrees. I'm a certified, PMP, project management professional. I've worked for 16 years for a big Fortune 100 tech company. I was the tech person who would set up their call centers and their new operations. And I was the one who planned it all and executed all. I was making 6 figures. And all of a sudden I lost my job 2 years ago and I can't even get an interview. And I'm driving Uber so I can pay my rent on my apartment. And I'm shocked. And it's like, that could be me.
Something, yeah, Diane, it is so true. And it's true, of course, not only for our generation, the over 50 crowd, but it's also true for the young people as well. But I totally agree with you. I mean, and that's one of the reasons. Of course, I have to tell you, when I first started out, I've never really worked for anybody else. I mean, if I did, I created my own job in that market and then, figured out what to do from there. But I was in business at 21. So I've been in business all my life. And because way back, going way back, I said, I can't work for anybody and do things that I think are stupid. And not that all my decisions were great or that I did wonderful things and was not stupid myself at times, but at least it was my stupidity, not someone else's stupidity. So I've always kind of worked for myself. But for those people who have been used to a huge salary, like you say, 6 figures and up, and did really responsible things, to be downsized is really a tough thing, not only financially, but emotionally and psychologically. And as you say, and I have used this term myself, and that is, we are called the unemployable generation. And it's because people can hire people to do what we're good at doing, maybe not as well, but for far less money. And even a good friend of mine who said to me, and he said exactly this, he said, look what I'm working for now and look what I used to make. And I said, what did you used to make? And he said, $175,000 a year. And I said, do you think anybody in this day and age would hire you and pay you $175,000? And he said, no. And I said, so stop thinking about that and do what you have to do to make the living that you want to make now. But it's so true. So tell us a bit about this unemployable generation. Why is that?
Well, there's 32 million of us still in the workforce, baby boomers over the age of 54. Another 30 million have already retired or left the workforce. So out of 60-something million, only half of us are employed. But we need to keep working because the demographics of our country has changed. And this is one of the things that I'm starting a mission. I'm on my little soapbox because we need to change the status quo so that mature professionals stay gainfully employed in the workforce, if nothing else, to maintain the integrity or to establish the integrity of Social Security. Social Security was established in 1935 when the average age of a person who was 35 when they were born, the life expectancy was 47. And in 1935, Social Security was established to be funded at the age of 65, which meant that that was a small pittance set aside for those very, very old people whose children had probably died already. It was not meant to support a generation of healthy people living for 30 years. And it's just unfeasible unless we find a way to reincorporate these professionals in valuable business. So a lot of my book, talks about first what has happened, understanding this background, understanding what employers think. And a lot of it is, yes, you can replace certain skills for half the pay. And companies are changing the way they work, the way they think, the way they're structured. Corporations, when years ago you had hierarchical teams, kind of a pyramid. Today, your corporations are built around scrums and agile methodology where you have team responsibilities. Offices have changed. So 40% of people today work out of their homes. There's a gig economy that companies are not investing in training their employees. And many companies are wholesale moving their workforce to contract employees, 1099 employees instead of W-2 employees for a whole bunch of financial reasons. And so the workforce is changing. We have to get used to it. Instead of fighting it, we have to adapt to it. And we also have to learn what our strengths are. And as an older generation, we bring certain strengths to the table. And I've highlighted 10 key strengths that a lot of younger workers don't have. So we need to highlight those. At the same time, our biggest deficit is technology. Technology is growing exponentially. And even if you're 35, you are 10 years behind or 15 years behind. If you're 65, you're really behind. And so we really need to embrace technology and make a commitment to lifelong learning, to keep learning technology, systems, new programs, everything, or you will be left aside and unemployable. And so it's your responsibility as an employer to go out and learn those skills so that you can be employable.
Well, it's interesting, Diane. It's true. I mean, the skills that a 5-year-old have today are probably more than what I have at this point. And I mean, I've learned what I've had to do in order to survive and keep my business going and so forth. But it's true. I mean, when you give those statistics that over half of the population that is, over 50 is retired now or not working because either they've chosen to be taking an early retirement or have been downsized, that's quite a statistic. But going back to, whether or not people like you and me and others would be hired, age discrimination is illegal. We know that. But all you have to do is give your resume or show up for an interview, and they know how old you are. So what do you do about that age discrimination?
Yes, it is illegal, and it is rampant. Just as a real quick, IBM was just sued in September. They have systematically fired 20,000 workers over the age of 40 over the last 6 years because they want a younger workforce. And they say it's skills-driven and not age-driven, but that's quite a coincidence. What we need to do is find out, number one, you have to remain employable by embracing technology. Second, you need to learn what your strengths are. And those strengths are things like communication ability, their loyalty, their industry and company knowledge. They're that legacy understanding of the industry that new workers don't have. Their professional maturity, there's gut judgment, there's understanding of numbers and finance. I have an MBA, okay? I didn't really understand corporate finance for 10 years until I was working in it. I didn't know how to build a P&L from scratch. Yes, I took corporate finance classes and all that, but I couldn't sit down with a piece of paper and build a prototype P&L and then manipulate the percentages. So younger people don't have that skills and experience. They may not understand budgets. If you have somebody who just spent $150,000 on college, is carrying a $37,000 debt, has a $60,000 car, and just had a $50,000 wedding, having a corporate budget that limits how much you spend on your per diem, or understanding the finances at a micro level, they may not have that skill in a corporation that you do with a lot more experience. So we have got to learn what our 10 key competencies are, what makes us unique, and we need to build that into our story or our way that we connect with employers. And one of the ways that I suggest, go ahead.
I was going to say, Diane, though, part of that also doing really good research on companies to know who are age-friendly employers, because there are going to be, well, I mean, one of the reasons that they want younger employees is also they don't have to pay them as much because they're starting at a much lower level of pay. But, I mean, would it not be important to know the history of the organization that you're going to? Because I'm sure there's a pattern there as well.
There is, and age discrimination is cultural in nature often. Like in IBM, it was systemic. They decided they wanted younger workers who were more relevant. They made that corporate decision. Corporate America, in terms of the high-tech companies, the Facebooks and the Googles, they think it's perfectly okay to deliver ads only to certain demographics, which can include age. So there's a mentality at some corporations. But many times, yes, there are companies that are age-friendly, but a lot of times the CEO doesn't have a problem, but the 22-year-old HR junior person who's screening the resumes doesn't have the cultural fit to value a 60-year-old the same way the CEO might. So it's within the individual companies and the individual personalities that can happen also. I believe most companies believe they are age blind, but it's the individuals there that need to be sensitized to this issue. And I think age makes a difference. I know my son said, I would never hire anybody in their 50s. I'm a software engineering project management. I would look at someone who's over 40 with, question their ability because there's so much technology. So the things that we need to do is, number one, reinforce that we have the technology skills, embrace lifelong learning, and learn new skills and technology. When I worked for big companies, I assumed that my company would train me for whatever they wanted me to do or for opportunities. Today, companies are not investing tens of thousands of dollars training people because turnover is so high that you have got to come ready to land in a job with a skill. And so certifications and badges and CEUs and independent certifications are more important often than traditional credentials. I have a master's, an MBA from 42 years ago. Is that really relevant to anybody except the university I'm teaching at because that's a requirement? What's more relevant is I have 106,000 people on my Facebook page. Makes me more employable than marketing than that master's degree I had 4 decades ago. So it's being up to date and maintaining new skills that's important.
It's really sad, Diane, that's kind of the state of affairs. So what do you suggest then to our listeners who are in the situation of being over 50, maybe wanting to get back in the workforce, or having been downsized, want to get a different job somewhere? What do you suggest they do?
Well, one of my favorite or key recommendations for anybody with a portfolio of work or 10 or 15 years of experience, I have found it easier to set up a small consulting company. And to do that, I'm talking about a sole practitioner with a company in your name where you can bypass HR and engage directly with a hiring manager. So if you are applying for a job as marketing director reporting to a CMO, if I go through HR, I'm going to be screened through this whole applicant tracking system and graded and keyword searched and all that kind of stuff with hundreds of other applicants. And then I'll be screened down to 10 applicants. If I manage to engage directly with the hiring manager, and I can do that through networking, through LinkedIn, through professional relationships, then I can engage with a high-level conversation with that person that puts me ahead of the line of all these unknown people who are coming in through HR. So I recommend that every professional have a plan B, which is your own business, a consulting business, and it can be, Diane Huth Marketing Consulting. If you have your name in the business, you don't even need to do a fictitious name certificate, even though it might be helpful. But you can have a sole proprietorship. You don't need to do LLCs and corporation. Small businesses have been running under sole proprietorships forever. You just build a 3 to 4 page credential website and you have a logo and some business cards, and you are literally in a consulting business, and you have the permission to engage in a different manner with the people who would hire you instead of through traditional HR. I think that's one of the strongest things you can do. And the other,
would they hire you? Would they hire you though as a consultant, or would they hire you then as an employee?
Either way. They might say, "Hey, you're fabulous. Would you be interested in a job?" You could say, "Yeah, I'm scaled back my consulting business right now. I'd love to work for you." Or I've had 2 cases where I actually came in as a consultant on a project basis. They loved me so much that they offered me a full-time job. And in one of these cases, I had a year-long contract with a professional high-tech trade association to do their marketing. I had a gal working for me, so I'd simply assign the contract to her. She was the account manager. She got 2/3 of the revenue. I got 1/3 of the revenue, and I went off to a new job, and she serviced the client. And I just turned it over to her. But yeah, I think you can engage a lot of times. The other thing is this wholesale move to independent contracting. There's a gig economy out there, and I don't think anybody today should be deceived or convinced that a company is going to hire you forever. That long-term employment bond has been broken. And therefore, I think most people should look at jobs as a consulting assignment, which could go away tomorrow if anything changes. And therefore, you should have multiple streams of income. And having a consulting company, number one, helps you cover voids in your employment history. So if you have months or even years being out of work, having a consulting company that you've had for 12 years or 15 years helps cover up those periods of employment. And then you should be doing pro bono work, volunteer work, small clients, helping out friends. And you can do that through your consulting business to keep adding, credentials and clients to your page. But I think that helps give mature professionals a different way to engage. And one of the most important things is the older you get, the higher the level of position, the more important your network is. Our generation knows how to network.
Yeah, that's so important. Well, gosh, we're coming down to the end of our part 1 of our interview with Diane. And as you can tell, she is just a wealth of information when it comes to your careers when you're over 50. And she has written, of course, all kinds of books and articles and everything else that we'll tell you about towards the end of our second half. But I hope you're listening to what she's saying. She is saying that you need to keep sharp with your skills, take as many certifications as you can, learn as much technology as you possibly can, create your own consulting company so that when you go and apply for a job and they say, well, where have you been for the last 10 years? You can say, well, I've been doing consulting on my own, but I saw this opportunity with you, and it looks like something that I would fit right into, so I wanted to see whether you're ever hiring people on a contractual basis or how else I might be able to service you. So there's just so many things that are available to you if you listen to what Diane is saying and read between the lines here and listen to what she has to offer, because she certainly has been through this. She knows it. She teaches it, and that's a big part of what's happening. Gosh, Diane, you certainly have been through the ringer, and you know what's happening. So we have just a minute before our break. Is there something that you can tell our listeners and that we didn't finish with in less than a minute?
The importance of networking. Every profession, every job has a professional association where you live with a local chapter. The best investment that you can make is to get active, volunteer, take a board position, which is a leadership position, and engage where the people who would hire you go to learn. And I'm a big proponent of becoming active with nonprofit associations in your field as one of the best way to network your way to career success. And as you get older, I think more and more jobs, half of all jobs in America are not posted on the job boards. They come from a personal relationship because you hire people you know, like, and trust, and you can get to know, like, and trust people by meeting them one-on-one on professional events.
Boy, that is so true. And I believe that. And, you know, there is no better time to do this, folks. And I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, young people are not joiners. So if you get active in your trade association or your local business association, you're going to be amongst people who are able to either refer you or hire you or make suggestions for you. But understand what networking is. Networking is not shaking a hand and handing out a business card. Networking is making a definite commitment to understand the person, looking directly into their eyes. Yes, you can hand them a business card, but if they are not people who are helpful to you, you could be helpful to them. And when you make connections for other people, they remember you. It's not shaking hands, looking over their shoulder, like who is coming next. Networking is really, really important, and it's part of you know, who you are and what you do. So don't think, oh, I went there and there was nobody and nobody could do anything for me and so forth. That is not what networking is. So hold on. We'll be back with Diane Huth after our break.